Good morning, everybody. I feel like I need to address something before we start, that 4 or 5 people have threatened to attack me because I'm wearing an Oilers t-shirt this morning. And I just want to say that I know about as much about hockey as you guys know about cricket. So I went to Edmonton and liked the shirt, but let's make a deal. If I see you wearing the wrong cricket jersey, I promise I won't be rude to you. So does that sound okay? What's the right one? England is the right cricket jersey. There we go, yeah. Well, it's great to be here. If you don't know me, my name's Tom. I'm part of the team, and I am wrapping up our series on a Mealtime with Jesus. Just so you know, this screen has decided to have a week off. That's okay. We believe in Sabbath. So you can look at this screen. If you want to look over there, that's great. So there's some bits of paper on your chairs. We're going to use that as a time of response together in ministry time. So don't screw them up and throw them at me. Don't write down your grocery list on them. Just keep them to hand, and we're going to get to those in a little bit. And we're going to jump into Luke 24. So we've been making our way through Luke. We've been looking at all of the meals, all of the parties that Jesus goes to in Luke. Someone once said that in Luke, Jesus is either going to a party or a meal, at a meal, or leaving a meal. And so we've been looking at all of this, and we're going to jump into the last meal that Jesus shares in the Gospel of Luke. So we're going to jump into verse 13. I'm going to read it to us, and it should come up. There we go. So this is Luke 24:13. That very day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them said, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." So as we begin, it's important to highlight this, that these 2 guys are sad. These are sad people, and I want to say that they're actually devastated people. And sometimes we can read the text, and it says they were sad, and it sounds like they were just a little bit annoyed. But I want to encourage you to think about the fact that they were heartbroken. Because you see, for hundreds and hundreds of years, the people of Israel had been waiting for God to move. They'd been waiting for the Messiah to come. They'd lived under the oppression of Rome. They were desperate. And then out of nowhere, this guy called Jesus appears on the scene, and he starts to heal people. He raises the dead. He's saying things they hadn't heard before, and he's saying the kingdom is at hand. Now, a lot of people rejected him, but a bunch of people started to follow him. And you can just imagine how that sense of momentum began to build. Things were happening. They too began to pray for the sick, and they saw people healed. They were being invited into this amazing new thing. You could just imagine them lying in bed at night and thinking, this is it. We're on the cusp of something. It's finally happening. The thing that our ancestors had been praying for, we are going to see it in our day. And then before their very eyes, he's arrested and tried, he's beaten, flogged, he's nailed to a cross with a spear in his side, and he's buried in a tomb. The Messiah they had long waited for had become a lifeless body in the ground. And even though Jesus had spent his ministry explaining to them that this is exactly what would happen, and the scriptures too pointed to this reality, they missed what was going on, and they were overcome by shock. His death literally shattered their worlds, and everything felt like it had fallen apart. Elsewhere we read that Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, just goes back to fishing. He doesn't know what to do. He'd seen everything firsthand. He'd heard Jesus teach, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm just going to go back to fishing." And then we meet these 2 guys on the road, and they're walking to a place called Emmaus, which means they were leaving Jerusalem. They cannot wrap their heads around what had happened. And they're in grief, and they just decide, let's just head off. And Emmaus actually was a place that lived in the Jewish cultural memory, because around 200 years before this, there had been a famous battle there by Jewish nationalists as part of the Maccabean revolt, and they rose up to try and free the Jewish people from Greek and Syrian oppressors, and they were kind of semi-successful until Rome came into place. But I don't think that the detail about where they're walking is an accident. I think Luke has included this to help us understand what was going here. These are two people who'd been left crushed by the apparent failure of Jesus to liberate their people, and they're leaving Jerusalem, and they're returning to a place that symbolized the thing they hoped he would have done. They wanted Jesus to liberate them politically from oppression. And when that hadn't happened, they begin to walk back to a place where that once had happened. And don't we so often do that in our own lives? When Jesus doesn't do the thing we're desperate for him to do, when our prayers are unanswered, when those yearnings are unfulfilled, so often we slip back into old habits. We return to sinfulness or to desperation because we don't know what else to do. It's kind of baked into us. I'm just going to go back to this thing I used to do because Jesus hasn't done what I wanted him to. I know I can relate to that so often in my life. And I was really trying to put myself in their shoes as I thought about this. I was like, when have I experienced something like this? When I felt like I was on the cusp of something incredible, and then actually quite quickly the whole thing fell apart around me. And I began to think about the time that Hannah and I, that's my wife and I, we suffered a miscarriage. And I really began to think that this is similar to maybe what they were experiencing. We'd had our eldest, Layla, was born. She was around 2. And we'd been trying for a baby, and then we got pregnant, and then we went to the hospital for the 12-week scan. And they look at us and they go, "I'm so sorry, there's just no heartbeat." And at that point, time seems to like slow down. And you feel disconnected from reality. It feels like things are kind of falling in on you. And I remember we walked out, and I was working for the BBC at the time. I used to be a journalist. And I rang them to tell them that I needed the day off, and I actually couldn't speak. I couldn't get a word out. And life just seemed to just suddenly stop. And it had been that promise of something incredible, new life, that had just been snatched away from us in a moment. And I genuinely think this is the level of trauma and grief that the followers of Jesus were dealing with. They thought they were in the middle of something incredible. And despite everything Jesus had said, when it actually happened, it kind of broke them a bit. And in a room like this, with this many people, I'm sure many of you will have experienced either something like a miscarriage or something similar where you had your hopes on something and it didn't work out the way you wanted. And they were literally meeting Jesus face to face. It's kind of easy to kind of like mock them a little bit, like, what are you doing? Like, you're literally meeting him, but because of their grief, because of their understanding or misunderstanding, they were meeting him face to face, but they could not see him. And I love this story so much, and in such a beautiful way, Jesus doesn't, make them feel stupid or do anything other than he meets them in such a beautiful way. He joins them on a journey. He unpacks the scriptures, and then he has a meal with them, and their eyes are opened. And so in verse 25, the story continues. And he said to them, "O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted them in all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. I wish we had the tapes for that sermon. That would be a good one. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going further. I love it. Oh no, I'll come back, okay. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight, as you do. They said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose the same hour and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and those who there gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. What a moment. What a glorious moment. I love this so much. You can just imagine the moment their eyes opened and they realized it was Jesus in front of them. That image of their hearts burning within them. I don't know about you, but I have had moments in my life where I suddenly became aware of the presence of God. And my heart burned within me. It made me think of Genesis 28 when Jacob says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." They were meeting the Lord face to face. And sadly, this may be news to you, but all of us are experts at looking at Jesus and not seeing him. We're experts in a few different things that are not things you want to put on your resume. We're quite good at forgetting what Jesus has told us. And we're also pretty good at looking at Jesus and not seeing him. Because so often our grief or pain or regret clouds our eyes and we cannot see him in front of us. And he's all around us. The scriptures tell us that he's inside of us. He's in this community. He's moving now. He's drawing in the lost. People are being healed. He's in creation all around us. He's in the faces of our kids. He's in the job that you do. He's in the house where you live. He's in the best moments and in the worst that we endure. And I love that last line in verse 35. How did the two men describe Jesus becoming apparent to them? It says this: he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. In the breaking of the bread. He didn't come in a cloud of glory. It's Pentecost Sunday, so, I'm open to that. But he didn't come in a pillar of fire. We are Vineyard, after all. He didn't come to condemn or to restore the political success of Israel. He didn't come to elect their party of choice. This is the risen Jesus, the first fruits of the age to come. He sits at the right hand of the Father. And what did he do? He meets them on a dusty road. He walks with them. He invites them to share their story with him. And then he eats with them, and their eyes are opened. And I think it was only at the point where they had poured out their grief and pain, where they tried to reason out loud the logic of why Jesus had failed, when essentially they had come to the end of themselves, and in the intimacy of a meal, they encountered the living God. Ronald Rolheiser, who's a Catholic priest and writer, said this: sometimes when we are unable to induce any kind of feeling that God exists, when we are unable to imagine God's existence, the reason is that God is now coming into our lives in such a way that we cannot manipulate the experience through ego, narcissism, self-advantage, self-glorification, and self-mirroring. This purifies our experience of God, because only when all of our own lights are off can we grasp divine light in its purity. Only when we are completely empty of ourselves inside an experience, when our heads and hearts are pumping dry, can God touch us in a way that makes it impossible for us to inject ourselves into the experience, so that we are worshiping God and not ourselves. A purification of our experience of God. I know I want that. In fact, I long for that in my life. And I long and pray for that in our lives as a church. A purification of our experience of God, not based on saying the right words, ticking the right boxes, not based on an experience that we are entirely managing, but a purification of our hearts so we can see the glory of God in this place. And so often we can build a structure that we tell God he can operate within. And we convince ourselves that it's slickness or, perfect presentations and the lights being perfect. And this morning, we've had a whole host of technical issues beyond our help. But I want to say that doesn't stop the Lord moving. And I have to remind myself that as the person standing on the stage, because I can become obsessed with making it look beautiful and perfect for you all. And maybe that's what you expect, and you can email me afterwards. But that's not what the Lord needs to move. I long for a purification of my heart so I can receive and see Jesus as he is before me, not based on my own ego or my own expectations. When Jesus doesn't do what I want him to do I embrace grief, or do I say, Jesus, reveal yourself to me in this moment, in my grief? And so the title for today's talk was Meals as Enacted Promise. And so I was wondering, why does this story serve as a promise for us? Well, I think what Jesus has done here is give us the little paradigm of how we can invite our neighbors and our friends and our colleagues into life with Christ. Because what he did for them, we can do for other people. It's really helpful like that. So we've got a slide that'll come up. What can we do? We can join them on a journey. We can ask them to share their story. And we can break bread and introduce them to the living Jesus. We can join them on a journey. We can ask them to share their story. And we can break bread and introduce them to Jesus. What's interesting is that this story starts with the two men walking to Emmaus away from Jerusalem. And it ends with them turning around and running back to Jerusalem. How many people in your life do you know that are currently walking the wrong way? They're walking away from Christ in grief or regret, sinfulness or brokenness because of things done to them or things they've done. People that have been hurt in the church and have had enough, and they're walking to Emmaus. They're walking back to something they used to do. And how many people this summer can we sit down with, hear their stories, break bread with, and see them turn back and come to Christ? I have so much faith for this summer. I have so much faith that we will hear dozens and dozens of stories of people beginning to enter into life with Christ because of the meals and the social stuff that we run as a community. This is our invitation for you this summer, and we're going to be doing the cards in a sec. Why don't you pick up the card now? If you're married, maybe just do one between you. Otherwise, the 10:30 might get angry. There's no one left. And just have a little read of the cards. And what we're going to do as part of ministry time is that we're going to ask you to fill out one of the cards and come and place it here on the stage as an offering and a commitment to God this summer. And there's no pressure. This is not a thing to guilt you. But we think that in doing this, it's a way of saying to the Lord, I want to be hospitable this summer. I want to be someone that you could use to do this through me. And so there's two, so you can fill both out, take one home with you, and then bring one up on the stage. You can stick it on your fridge, in your car, somewhere that you're going to see. And it could be one meal that you're going to host. I'm just going to throw a barbecue. Maybe it's going on a hike. Maybe it's something that you're going to do every week. You're going to play pickleball or watch the Oilers, whatever it is that you like to do. We want to encourage you to use these as a commitment to God that we are going to be a church that continues to embrace hospitality. We threw a banquet a little while ago, and this room was packed. And it was full of people actually who don't come to this church. People are desperate for community. And so we're going to have various things lined up. We're going to be running an alpha course in the fall, which again will be a perfect opportunity to invite people to as you connect with them over the summer. We're hoping to throw another big community meal. This time we'll probably get food trucks out in the parking lot and invite all of our neighbors and Old Town to come. I think this is going to be an exciting summer. So why don't we just take a second to pause? We're going to move into ministry time soon. But as we pause, why not just, you might want to close your eyes, whatever you want to do, ask the Lord to bring to mind a person, a neighbor, a colleague, maybe it's a number of people. Ask the Holy Spirit now just to bring to mind someone that this summer you can invite into your life, into your homes, people that you can journey with. It may well be people that you're already journeying with. Let's do that now for just 2 seconds. Jesus, come and speak to us. Maybe there's a family member who you haven't spoken to, maybe in years, because it's been too difficult. And maybe this is the summer to reconnect. Maybe there's that one neighbor who you do everything in your power to avoid. When they come out, you go in. When they go in, you come out. Maybe it's the work colleague who's asked you a couple questions about church.